This is by Rebecca Bender, March 20th, so just 11 days ago. 4 reasons Christians shouldn't care about same-sex marriage. I don't know Rebecca, but I really appreciate the way she presents things. I was sent the link and then watched some of the clips online, and she's certainly engaging and seems like a very caring Christian woman. I want to interact with what she had to say. And Rebecca, if someone sends this to you, I'd love to have you on one day to discuss these things, if you'd like to. Not to argue them, but to share different perspectives. So, Joey, let's start with clip number 13. Why Christians shouldn't care so much about same-sex marriage.
Lately on the news, I've been hearing about some bakers out there who are refusing to make cakes for same-sex marriages. Now, I totally get it if that's their stance and they have the right to refuse service to anyone. But one family-owned bakery actually went out of business because they were refused to give in to the judge's orders to not discriminate against a same-sex couple. Now, for me personally, I find that so extreme. I wondered if they went through that much research over all of the heterosexual marriages out there that came in to get a cake for their ceremony.
Yeah, so Rebecca, again, I appreciate your spirit in presenting this, but since you have presented it publicly, just like when I present things publicly, they're all open for discussion. I just had a guest on from the UK, from Wales, who explained that he's willing to go to court over these issues because there are issues of righteousness and discrimination against Christians. So here's my question. The fact that they have suffered for their faith, and it's not exactly right when you say they refuse to obey the orders not to discriminate. That'd be a little bit of a misrepresentation. But because they suffered for their choice to stand on their conviction, does that somehow make it questionable? I mean, certainly we all know that people give their lives for the gospel every year. I've had friends and colleagues who've been imprisoned or tortured or stoned or even killed for their faith. I've preached numbers of situations where it could have been very dangerous, one in particular, or a couple in particular, very life-threatening, but we didn't think for a second we don't preach because of that. So the fact that they went out of business, by the way, primarily because gay activists targeted their company and told people, if you do business with them, Sweet Cakes by Melissa, if you do business with them, if you work with them for other weddings, etc., then we will boycott you. So that's why they went out of business. But that's the first thing. The fact that it costs them something, that means that it's questionable? I don't understand where you're coming from, and I'd love to hear more clarification. Here's the other thing. It's one thing to research the background of a couple coming in to get married. Now you're going to research, well, were they legitimately divorced or this or that? And on a certain level, well, no one asked you to research that. This is another thing, and let's just say you had a bakery. Let's take an extreme case. A mother comes in with her daughter. She's 40, her daughter's 20, and she says, hey, we're going to be married, and here's my daughter, and we've always been in love, and now we can sanctify that through marriage. We'd like you to make a cake for us and have our names on it, Lois and Louise. That's my daughter. And would you do that? I mean, is there anywhere where you'd say, hey, I can't do that in good conscience? Could it be that standing up for what's right is something that we are simply called to do, and if we really love people, that we do what's right? I mean, isn't that how slavery was abolished in America? Isn't that how people are fighting against abortion and other things today? If we believe something's right, we stand for it, regardless of what it costs. We'll be right back.
I mean, did they check to see if a heterosexual couple was in fornication? Did they check to see if the heterosexual was into pornography? Did they check to see if the husband or wife was gluttonous with food during ordering the menu? I mean, are we putting that much research and emphasis into heterosexual couples as much as we are into homosexual couples?
All right, that was the voice of Rebecca Bender. She wrote on this on her website March 20th. And has clips on her website and on YouTube for reasons Christians shouldn't care about same-sex marriage. Rebecca, it's not marriage. It's not marriage. two men coming together, two women coming together. It's not marriage. When you change that, as gay journalist and author and one of the leading gay thinkers, Andrew Sullivan said over 20 years ago, that's the only reform we need. Once we have that, we'll get all the other changes we want. You're talking about redefining society, redefining what your kids are going to learn in school, ultimately redefining the very nature of marriage, and you have no legitimate way to limit it to just two people. And if a fornicating couple comes in and says we're getting married, now they're stepping in the right direction. If two men or two women come in and say we're getting, quote, married, it's not married. And there's no possible way I would participate in that or stand with that as a follower of Jesus, any more than I'd stand with a friend who says, hey, I'm married, but I'm taking another wife. And again, look, there are issues that have larger implications. And when two men walk in or two women walk in, I don't need to research anything when they say we are going to, quote, get married. Clip number 16.
To God, sin is sin, and he's no respecter of persons. I think that we tend to measure sin according to what we think is better or worse, but that's not of God and that's not in the Word. So I encourage you, if you want to continue to make a difference in our culture and you want to reach same-sex couples, to please don't try to make their sin worse than yours, because when you point one finger at someone, you got three pointing back, right?
Again, I really appreciate what she's saying and the way she is saying it. A few issues. First, we're not pointing at a particular sin. We're talking about redefining marriage and the effects it has on a culture. We're talking about kids being taught certain things in school. There is not a push that is celebrating fornication, that is celebrating adultery, that is celebrating other things that God says are sinful and wrong. But there is a push to celebrate homosexuality, to normalize it, and to redefine marriage. And it's coming from every corner, every front, as our guest in England said, that Christians are being openly discriminated against in the culture. Look, and by the way, all sin is sin, but not all sin is the same. The Scripture's clear on that. In other words, God never destroyed a nation because sometimes some of the people had bad attitudes towards each other. No, he would bring judgment when they were killing each other and raping each other and committing all types of injustice and sexual immorality, etc. So all sin is sin, but not all sin is as ugly or severe in God's sight. It would be far worse to go and punch someone in the face and beat them to a pulp than to simply have a bad attitude towards them and then to act on that attitude, then to commit the violent act. Obviously, some things are more serious than others. Scripture plainly lays that out. Yes, all sin is sin, and all of us stand by grace. But again, Rebecca, there is an activist agenda that is knocking at our door, and it wants to redefine society in many, many ways, and those who came out of the closet want to put us in the closet. So, of course, I want to reach every individual. I've had many wonderful, warm conversations with men and women who identify as gay or lesbian, some bisexual, less so transgender in terms of those I've just talked to. Look, I'm on the plane all the time. I meet lots of people. And I'm sure a good percentage of the male flight attendants are homosexual. And, I'm going to interact with them the same as anybody else and be just as friendly, and they'll be friendly with me and so on. If we have an opportunity to chat, I'll chat with them as a fellow human being loved by God and loved by me. That's not the issue. The issue is social consequences. The issue is redefining of fundamental institutions. The issue is where things go. The issue is what kind of world, as Dietrich Bonhoeffer said, what kind of world are we going to leave to our children? He said the ultimate test of a moral society is the kind of world that it leaves to its children. You are talking about the principal threat to religious freedom, freedom of speech, freedom of conscience that's in our society today. So my issue is not what two men or two women do in private if they're not breaking the law. That's between them and God. We are not supposed to be, the thought police going from place to place to place, but we are supposed to stand for righteousness. We are supposed to be the salt and light. Rebecca asks, Why are we as Christians in church making the pregnant girl who's out of wedlock step down from choir, but we don't address the gluttonous pastor? Do we ask him to step down until he can get his food addiction and idolatry to food under control? Now, that is hypocrisy. Actually, this is an interesting point, and I've been reading a decent amount of articles on obesity among Christians and how to deal with it, etc. Just because someone's overweight doesn't necessarily mean they're a glutton. That's just the first thing to point out. So just because someone's overweight doesn't mean that. And it is an issue having to do with self-control. However, nowhere does the New Testament ever tell us to excommunicate someone who claims to be a Christian and eats too much. It is an issue. Sure, it's an issue. It's an issue of discipline. But, and again, some people can be overweight. They can have some thyroid issue or whatever the correct thing is. I may be getting this wrong. There can be some medical causes, so you just don't know by looking. Yeah, but most are overweight because of not having good eating habits. They may not be gluttons. They may just not have good eating habits. They may not eat the healthiest foods or something like that, even though they're absolutely not gluttons. Excuse me. But nowhere does the Bible make that equivalency between that, say, and two men having sex or two women having sex, or a woman getting pregnant out of wedlock and then saying, hey, I'm still sleeping with my boyfriend, but I'm going to be on the choir. No, that is something that Scripture does single out. So it's not a matter of hypocrisy if we emphasize things, as long as we emphasize them properly. But again, I appreciate the points you're making. What you must factor in is the activism we are dealing with.